Welcome back to In Focus Kentucky. On this episode, we're breaking down Kentucky's House Bill 487, which broadens the base sales tax in our state by now including select services previously exempt from taxation. And joining me now to discuss how the new state tax increase will affect nonprofit organizations is Danielle Clore of the Kentucky Nonprofit Network. Thanks so much for joining us here on the program.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for the opportunity to talk about this really important issue.
Absolutely. And for those who haven't heard of exactly what your organization does in our state, break that down for us.
Absolutely. Kentucky Nonprofit Network is the state association of nonprofits in the Commonwealth. There are over 19,000 organizations, large, small, urban, rural. We represent about 650 members of that vast number of organizations, but come in contact with about 3,000 nonprofits on a regular basis. So we're there to provide a unified public policy voice for these important organizations, as well as provide them with resources, education, and information on best practices so that they can be good stewards of donor and government dollars when necessary, and that they're effective in meeting really important community needs.
Now, how exactly does this new tax law affect nonprofits?
Well, it's been a really unfortunate distraction. Nonprofits exist to strengthen our communities. There's so much talk in Kentucky about creating a kind of quality of life that attracts jobs and businesses to this state. Nonprofits are critical to that. Quality of life with healthcare and education and all of those things that make communities a place where businesses want to open up shop and hire our Kentuckians. Nonprofits are also employers, employing 1 in 11 Kentuckians, 9% of the state's workforce. So when this legislation was passed, there was some initial grumbling about would this impact nonprofits, and we had always kind of leaned on the interpretation of the Department of Revenue on that. And so we were shocked, nonprofits were shocked, and really a tremendous amount of anxiety about, does this impact us? How do we comply? And so unfortunately, it's been what we've called a perfect storm. Really, a Supreme Court case as recently as March of this year, combined with this legislation, has meant that admissions to nonprofit fundraising events are now taxed. Silent auction items at those events are taxed. Memberships to some organizations that include admissions are taxed. So it's been just an incredible time of confusion and anxiety, and organizations really not sure how to comply. And we're talking about many organizations, especially small ones, who do not have the infrastructure to spend time to understand the issue, number one, and to implement what needs to happen from a business practices standpoint.
And I know that your organization has provided both resources and even webinars to kind of help educate and communicate what this new tax law means. How has this process gone so far?
It's been pretty hectic, as you can imagine. We spent a lot. We didn't really sound the alarm on this at first because we were waiting to get some better guidance from the Kentucky Department of Revenue. And then when it became very clear that yes, these things were going to be taxed, that was really one of the hardest emails I've ever had to send out to our members. So we kind of stepped into gear to do a webinar and tried to use the information we have available. But to be clear, everybody's in new territory here, including the Department of Revenue. So there's been a lot of information from them at one point saying, yes, camps, for example, will be taxable. Now camps are not. So it's just been an incredible amount of anxiety when information is kind of changing from day to day or week to week. So the webinar that we did, we shared with folks, this is the information as we know it at this time. It's sold out. We have, probably 20 to 30 folks downloading it on a daily basis. We continue to get questions from nonprofits. Of course, they are submitting those questions sometimes online to the Department of Revenue, who's promised a 48-hour turnaround. And then those organizations are often sharing those with us. So we're trying to compile all of that in a way online where organizations can search it and find their own answers, because if you look right now at the Department of Revenue website, it's some pretty sparse information. So organizations are just incredibly frustrated. They're not very happy, and they're really concerned about spending time and resources on this issue and how it might impact donations and individual support of their special event and their mission.
And how critical are nonprofits to our state of Kentucky?
I can't stress enough, again, as I mentioned, they're a major employer. 1 in 11 Kentuckians working for a nonprofit. But, when you think about feeding the hungry or quality health care, the environment, children's services, just oodles of things. And again, we're in the height of summer fundraising season where these organizations are trying to raise needed money for their mission. You're also in the height of, a lot of summer programming and things. And so that's what's really thrown folks for a loop. And, this, became law effective July 1. And so folks probably had a couple of weeks to digest it all. And really, I think, early August before they have to file their first returns. So they're just really struggling to understand how to comply and how to communicate really with their donors and the folks that support their mission in such important ways.
And moving forward now with this law that is in place, just within the last week, there's been talk about legislation being brought onto the floor, and I know your organization is working on creating some legislation. So talk on those two
Absolutely. There was a bill filed on Friday, I believe, has a number of legislators signed on, which we think is important. We're excited to see, thankfully, that legislators understand the negative impact this is having on nonprofit organizations. And the statement issued by the Speaker of the House said that this was certainly not intended, that they didn't anticipate the Department of Revenue would take this approach in implementing the law. The Department of Revenue has said, well, it's the Supreme Court case has given us little wiggle room. To nonprofits, that kind of rings, they don't care what the reason is, they just know this has created a really difficult operating environment for them and really a distraction from their mission. So we anticipate several pieces of legislation will be filed. As you mentioned, we're working on our own. We're looking at other states who've tackled this issue because we want to be sure that we are working toward a bill that helps all nonprofits and protects nonprofits from this kind of issue from popping up again. So we will see what ultimately gets passed. There are lots of folks who weren't happy about this bill. Everyone's going to be working on their own specific issue, of course, but we hope that the public will stand behind nonprofits and really help legislators understand how critical this is. It impacts communities, we would argue, in a way that no other sector is impacted. I think the argument has been, well, you're passing it on to the donor. You are, but the administrative burden on nonprofits is great. And, in fairness, it is disappointing to me that hopefully we will get a bill passed and it will be one we'll be very happy about, but in many ways the damage will have been done for many organizations. They will already have had to comply, they will already have had to deal with this issue, but we're hoping that we can get a fix for them as quickly as possible.
And for nonprofit organizations that want to reach out to you or find out more about your organization, how do they do that? You
can visit us online at www.kynonprofits.org. So on our website, of course, we'd love to have you join and become a KNN member. This fight is just getting started, so we're eager to get folks on our team to work with us. And the webinar I mentioned, that recording is available. We also worked with the Department of Revenue on some quick recordings on how to set up folks' sales and use account, and as well as how to file those returns. So if folks are really dealing with, I don't even know how to get started, we urge them to check out those resources. And of course, if you become a KNN member, we are going to be keeping people up to date, up to speed on every step of this process as we work on a legislative solution.
And do you anticipate providing more webinars and just other informational?
I don't know that there's much more to share other than the basics we have now. As we shared that on the webinar that day, it's the information we have as we knew it then, and that's we haven't gotten much more clarity. So I think we will work on this site that I mentioned where we're putting kind of the Q&A that different folks are having with the Department of Revenue. We think that's going to be helpful. We have a conference every October, so I'm sure this will be on the agenda among many other. There are other state and federal policy issues impacting nonprofits. This is just one of them, unfortunately. Charitable giving is another. So there are lots of issues impacting nonprofits, and again, it's a really difficult environment for organizations who are trying very hard to keep focused on community needs. So we're doing the best we can to stand up for them and protect them, and so we urge folks to get engaged with us so they can have the latest and most accurate information on this and other issues.
Well, Danielle, we appreciate you joining us here on the program and giving us the nonprofit perspective on this issue.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Now, thank you so much for watching In Focus Kentucky. There are many ways to keep up with updates about this show. You can watch this or any of our past shows online at SpectrumInFocus.com. And of course, you can follow me on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Just search at Mario Anderson TV. Have a great week.